Hello there. I will give it a few more minutes just to let everyone join the webinar today. As you can see, our panelists are in attendance, but I'll give it another few seconds and then we'll get started. Okay, all right, hopefully everyone has joined. Or in the process of joining. Let me introduce myself then. My name is Nicholas Barton. I'm the founder of the Barton Partnership. Today I'm hosting this webinar live from Singapore. I am based out of London, but for the first time in over 2 years, I've made the journey across, which is fantastic. It's great to be back in the region. It's certainly great to catch up with the team and see some old faces that I haven't seen for a couple of years in person. And it's so energizing to be back. And it's certainly great to be back here in Singapore. The place feels like it's buzzing again, which is great. The webinar today, brilliant topic, one that actually, as much as we are focusing on financial services, is relevant for every industry and sector, but we thought it more relevant right now for financial services, given the challenges in the industry. 3 fantastic panelists I'm going to come on to in a second. But firstly, for those that haven't come across the Barton Partnership before, a little quick introduction, if I may. So we are, sorry, let me just go back a slide. Bear with me 1 second. I seem to have lost control. There we go, the Barton Partnership. I founded the business 15 years ago. We are now just over 80 people across 6 offices globally. Our Asia Pacific reach, obviously an office in Singapore, and we've just opened our first office in Hong Kong, which is fantastic news. And our lead for Hong Kong is over in Singapore this week as well, which is fantastic. We focus purely on strategy, which is why we have focused the agenda around strategy. So 90% of the people that we work with from a candidate point of view have a consulting-based background, and we place it into strategy and M&A, data and analytics, ESG and sustainability and transformation and change across obviously financial services being one of our key markets, but private equity, professional services, and commerce and industry as well. And that's from small startups through to fintech, through to large global universal banks, etc. as well. 2 aspects to our business: permanent search. So we have a global network of 55,000 candidates, and in a normal world, and hopefully we're coming back to that, that gives us the opportunity to work with our clients and talk about global mobility. In the last 12 months, we've completed over 250 searches. We looked at our candidate placements over the last 3 years. So for us, it's all about the fit and making sure we're getting the alignment right. In the last 3 years, 84% of the candidates that we placed are still with the same company. 52% are now in a more senior role, which is great. And on the independent consulting side, this is the side of the business that places interims as effective into independent consulting. And again, we've got a network of around 5,000 full-time independent consultants. In the last few years, we've completed over 1,600 projects. Again, talking to our clients, 75% have returned for further work, and 98% have told us that we exceed their expectations. And that's an area that we are building out more actively in the Asia Pacific region as well. So do talk to us if we can help you in any short-term project needs. And so today, the strategy agenda, the strategy talent agenda in financial services, 3 fantastic panelists for us today. I'm going to start with Harshika. So Harshika, who was with us but seems to have left us, but I'm sure she'll join us in a second. Harshika is the CEO and head of strategy for JP Morgan in Asia Pacific, based out of Hong Kong. She is the managing director for strategy, covering Asia Pacific, working with corporate investment banking, asset and wealth management, and commercial banking businesses. She also serves as the CEO for Hong Kong, which is the home to the firm's Asia Pacific headquarters. And she's back. Good to see you. I'm just introducing you. And Harshika also sits on the board of JP Morgan Securities for the Asia Pacific business. So welcome, Harshika. Second, Harpreet is Managing Director and Global Head of Strategy for HSBC Life and Insurance Partnerships. He is responsible for strategy and business development for HSBC's life insurance manufacturing operations and insurance partnerships globally, and is also based out of Hong Kong. And last but certainly not least, Andrew Hardie, a long-term friend to the business and myself, a managing director and partner within the financial services practice of BCG, focused and based out of Singapore. Andrew leads the financial services work with clients in Singapore and drives the Asia-wide wealth management practice. Andrew also sits on the ops chair, or is the ops chair, should I say, for the Southeast Asia business for BCG, and led the COVID response team for the region when COVID came into play. So 3 fantastic panelists. I'm going to stop sharing and bring you all into main view. Good to see you all. Now, for those that have joined us today, I will try and do want to try and make this as interactive as possible. If you do have questions for the panelists, then do please drop them into the Q&A box. I will try and bring them into the discussion during the course of the discussion. And if not, I will try and address them at the end of the discussion in a quick Q&A session. So we are talking about the challenges around talent now, and over the past couple of years now, millions of people and organizations around the world have been forced obviously into hybrid working. We all have experienced that. Survey after survey have shown that employers are eager now for employees to return to the office as soon as possible. Employees, not so much, due to health, family and work-life balances. Now with vaccines and therapies, we're sort of trying to readdress and rebalance what the new normal is. Despite variances now. And of course, you know, as a Barton Partnership, as an organization ourselves, we've very much been engaging our clients globally, certainly with regard to candidates that we're working with and trying to understand the right balance. We did a survey recently, 74% of respondents in Asia Pacific would prefer to work from home 3 or more days per week and have some, with some more, sorry, let me start again because I'm getting tongue-tied. 3 or more days per week, or having more flexibility to work from home if that's possible. So let me start with the first question, and I'm going to bring that to Harshika. Harshika, after 2 years of on and off remote working, many employers are reevaluating what they expect from company culture and employee value proposition. How have employee priorities shifted in your business and or your team, and how have you and your organization responded to that?
Great, thanks very much, Nick, and a big thank you for inviting me to today's topical discussion. As you know, I'm on day 6 of quarantine, so I embrace every opportunity to have some human interaction. So a big thank you to you all. See you. And I'll try not talk too much because I haven't spoken to very many people over the last few days. I think certainly from a personal point of view, having worked 28 years in what I thought was normal, i.e. going to the office every day, not 9 to 5 since I started my life in consulting. So it was more like 7 to 11. But I always thought that was normal. Sitting next to your colleagues every day was very normal. And anything which challenged that actually made me feel very uneasy because you couldn't actually see, or you felt that if you couldn't see what was going on, it wasn't actually happening. The work wasn't getting done. Yeah. And clearly what the last 2.5 years have shown is that, in fact, in spite of having the most volatile market conditions, you know, and volume growth in many of our lines in business being explosive, in fact, the work did get done. So now, in answer to your question, what's changed going forwards? I think employees, to your earlier point of flexibility, I think the broad term, employees are expecting an organizational culture which embraces many facets around the employee. So it's not just about your compensation that you take home at the end of the year or that promotion, but rather have you got all of the different pillars in place to support what is, you know, a person. So whether it's mental health, do you provide all that our employees need around mental health? Because clearly that was something that became exacerbated over the last couple of years. You've already touched upon flexibility. Now, I'm in Hong Kong. I'm the CEO of JP Morgan Hong Kong. The minute we have back to work, and we had back to work from April the 21st over here, 80 to 90% of the people have rushed back in. Because over here, the dynamic is very different. Very small apartments, people potentially live with extended families, children at home, and shorter commute times. If I extrapolate the last few weeks that I've spent in London, with commute times being more than an hour, sitting on a tube, bigger houses, I think people there would, you know, are preferring to at least work 3 days out of 5 from home. So I think we don't have a one-size-fits-all solution, nor should we, based on the city and people's personal situations. Having said that, 100% of our employees now want flexibility to work from where they can work from, given their own personal situations. I think the third thing that's really resonated for people is work and their job having a sense of purpose. I think purpose is something that we've always spoken about previously. But once again, when you go through something big like COVID, which in many cases has shattered people's personal lives and situations, people ask themselves the question, am I doing the job that I want to do? Does it fill me with a sense of purpose? And therefore, as an employer, right, we need to constantly make sure that we are challenging our employees, that we are giving them mobility options, and that we're exposing them to the whole firm. And one thing that I found when I stepped into the Hong Kong CEO job is that a lot of people actually find it easier to phone a headhunter to look for the next job, as opposed to realize that there is a dearth of opportunities within their own organization.
Right.
And so one thing that we are doing more of as an organization, right, is promoting more cross-line of business networking events so that people understand the opportunities that exist within other lines of business or beyond geographical boundaries as well.
But do you think there's a fit just on that alone, and talking as a headhunter, obviously, do you think that part of the reason why they haven't looked internally is they don't want to perhaps raise the impression that they're dissatisfied or unhappy in their current role?
I think there's an element of that, and there's an element of they don't know enough about the other businesses that are out there, and therefore what their skill set, where their skill set may be suited, and B, they don't know who to approach.
Right. Okay, that's fair enough. Sounds like great initiatives. Thank you. Harpreet, can I bring you in then, please? Your view on that question.
Thank you, Nick, and great to be here. So look, what has changed and how have we responded? I think, as Harshika said, obviously remote working, flexible working, hybrid working, I think that's the new norm. It's sort of here to stay. We now, obviously, 2 years into the pandemic, we have obviously evidence-based realization that people working remotely, are able to perform to the same standard, if not better, relative to people who were working in the office. We did a survey within HSBC and we asked a large number of colleagues how they felt about working from home as a result of the pandemic. And the findings were interesting. More than 50% people said they felt more productive at home. Over 20% said they did not feel they had any impact on their productivity. 75% people said, overwhelming majority, that their work-life balance has improved. And more than 80% people felt that their mental health was stronger, right? Wow. So there's a lot of positive takeaways.
And just to be clear, if I can, was that survey done globally across HSBC, all businesses, or just in the Asia Pacific region?
Global survey.
Right, fantastic.
And then I think what's changing, obviously, employees are expecting more choice over how they work and where they work and how how long they work. And frankly, if we fail to meet those expectations, it will certainly present a talent flight risk. We also hear a lot of questions from both employees and managers of people, because this is still relatively new, around how do they adapt their working styles to adjust to the new normal. So we've created a lot of programs, learning solutions, modules around how people work in this new normal, and then what it means for managers to kind of manage their teams, especially people who manage larger teams that are geographically diverse and spread out in a remote way. And look, I think what it will also mean in the future is this certainly is going to have a knock-on effect on how we use office space. I think there's going to be a lot more open sharing spaces. People will certainly come to office, some occasionally, some more often, but the layouts are going to change. And longer term, this is also going to be positive for the planet because this will allow us to rethink how we use offices. And very likely business travel is not going to, reach the levels that we saw pre-pandemic.
So absolutely reducing our carbon footprint. Absolutely. Good, thank you. Andrew, please, your thoughts. And clearly, obviously, both from a BCG perspective, but also from what you're seeing across your clients, if you may.
I mean, let me answer from a kind of BCG and consulting point of view first. I think the first thing is that the last 2 years have really hit our employee value proposition. I think that's unavoidable. And I'm sure like all consulting firms globally have probably found the same, but it's been particularly bad here in Southeast Asia because of the fact that we operate, you know, a kind of hub and spoke model where there's lots of travel and lots of cross-functional teaming. I would say there's 3 things. The first one is around kind of training and apprenticeship. The reality is that we found it, and you know what we do is we hire people, or the core of our business has changed a bit with the more experienced hire, is we hire people who are relatively junior as a first job out of MBA, and then there's an apprenticeship model to bring them quickly up to speed. That's been much harder when people haven't been in the office or people haven't been in team rooms, right? You have, you know, fresh MBA grads who are on a 2-year consultant timeline who've never met anybody at BCG in person. So that has been tough for what we're trying to do, which is apprentice people quickly. I think, you know, the travel and the teaming also have been impacted, right? So people join consulting, I get to do a lot of different things. I get to travel and see different markets. And teaming, I get to work with a range of different teams. So I might be 3 months here, 3 months there, and get to do a whole bunch of different things. But I kind of bond with my teams while I'm there. So the travel is obviously gone, and then the teaming, it's been harder to build affiliation to people's teams and build that kind of spirit that existed when we were in person. So, you know, we, as I'm sure everyone on this call, have been impacted by a kind of general feeling that the value proposition of consulting isn't as strong as it was. Right. And obviously with, you know, our biggest competitor for talent is technology, right? Is the big technology firms. And, you know, they can offer better hours and the same or more money. So we have a kind of perfect storm. How have we responded, and what have we seen since the reopening? So the first thing is that so I think people in our teams recognize, you know, the downside, but as folks were saying, as we reopen, first of all, people are quite happy with remote work. So, you know, I don't want to go back to getting on a plane on Monday morning and coming back on Thursday night and, you know, hanging out in hotels all the time. Productivity is the same or better. And then, as Harpreet was talking about, we have got the perfect opportunity to, change our carbon footprint here. If we suddenly go back to flying all our consultants around every week, we're really missed an opportunity, right? I mean, this is the perfect opportunity to do what we need to do. So we've been thinking about, how do we get collaboration to work better remotely? So one of the things that we're doing, actually, and I can talk about it in more detail, is the using virtual reality in the metaverse for our team meetings. So right. So moving off of Zoom meetings and into VR meetings. So that's something we're piloting in support functions and in our teams.
So are you telling me that there is an avatar out there that looks like you in the metaverse right now?
There is. I've got a bright white jumper on. I'll send it to you.
Fantastic, amazing, right?
So the second thing is, what's the balance between on-site versus off-site? And because we do need to have people in teams, and we do need to have people back in the office. So for support teams, we have tried to move it to 50-50. So 50% in and 50% off. And then for consultant teams, we're trying to reset our norms to alternate weeks, or every third week, or 50% of the team on site, 50% off, so that we can kind of reduce travel and kind of keep the lessons while kind of bringing that value proposition back. So that's what we've seen and what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And again, with your clients, as you say, when you see what you're seeing, so that there is no norm. Have you seen anything being more successful than others, or I mean, as Harshika says, there's no one shoe fit all strategy, but have you seen more effective strategies than others with organizations you've been working with?
So I think most people are doing the same thing, which is partial return and partial reopening. Right. I think most organizations have been hit by the kind of great resignation in terms of the value proposition. And so, I think there are interventions that we can recommend there, but maybe that's another question.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Thank you. And actually, funny enough, we've just had our first question through from Sarab, which actually goes straight to my second question. So it's good timing. So with the shift in employee priorities compounded by evolving workplace demands, how have you found that adapting your hiring profiles and hiring certain skills or capabilities with a long-term view? So effectively, what future skills are you now looking for that you were not previously looking for with the hires that you're looking to make or will be making going forward in this new world? Harpreet, perhaps if I start with you, please.
Sure, I'll say a few things, Nick. So I think first and foremost, you've got to have sort of subject matter expertise. That's a given. And ethics and values is basically non-negotiable, right? So that's kind of the foundational skills we look for. And I'll speak for the strategy function, right, within financial services, because that's kind of the relevant lens here. I think increasingly our business models are becoming more digital. There's a lot of use of data and analytics. And we're not expecting that everybody is suddenly going to become an app developer or sort of a data scientist, but you ought to have the baseline skills and understanding of, what this means, because without that, frankly, it's very difficult for you in a strategy function to kind of, develop plans and strategies that help your organization's future-proof business models, right? So I think that's increasingly becoming very important.
Yeah.
I also have to say there needs to be a certain sense of urgency and kind of competitive paranoia. Things are changing very rapidly. Customer expectations are evolving. We've got competition, a lot of competition, from obviously the traditional players as well as, early stage companies, including tech players. And we need people who have that mindset, the agility, execution focus to basically challenge status quo, and be able to shift business models that remain relevant, in this hyper competitive environment. And the other thing I would say, sustainability increasingly is becoming extremely important. So certainly when I interview people, I do try and get a sense of, their understanding of what sustainability means. And if he or she were to join the team and the organization, what climate considerations they would, take into account in their decisions, their actions, their conversations with clients in the work they do.
Yeah, fine, fair enough. Harshika, please, your views.
Yeah, sure. So just a couple of points to underpin what I'm going to say. So over the last couple of years, as we've gone through the pandemic, the other big shift, certainly at JP Morgan and organizations more broadly, has been the whole diversity and inclusion agenda. The amount of momentum that topic has had a big influence on how we actually hire and the diversity of candidates. And I don't literally just mean gender diversity, I mean diversity of background as well to fulfill roles. So that's point one. Point two that underpins how we've changed our thinking on how we hire is then the nature of the jobs that have now emerged in a post-COVID world, right? So there are many jobs today, when I look on our internal jobs board, which didn't even exist 2 or 3 years ago. So whether it's AI, whether it's machine learning, whether it's data scientists, whether it's digital marketing, we weren't hiring for those individuals 2 or 3 years ago, right? And part of that is part of that's COVID driven, and part of that's also with the onset of fintechs being, disruptors to a bank's traditional model. We've got to now try and play catch up very quickly with these guys. So with those things in mind, I would say the one thing that we are now doing very differently in the way we hire is we don't say, I'm looking for a data scientist, and therefore I'm looking for someone with 20 years of data science experience.
Yeah.
But rather, because you'll be looking for a needle in a haystack then.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily fit with what we're trying to do, is let's interview a diverse slate of people. So now for every job, the focus is more on what are the skills you're looking for. great presenter, great salesperson, understands technology, can program, mathematical, analytical, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You know, and a couple of examples to quote, wealth management is a big area of focus of pretty every bank around the globe.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone's trying to attract the same type of private bankers. Okay. So one thing that we've decided to do in Asia is actually spread the net much wider and look at people who are good salespeople and relationship builders.
Yeah.
In other types of organizations. They don't have had exactly, whether it's from an insurance company, whether it's from a consulting firm, whether it's from a fintech, right? And actually, we've had a lot of success bringing people like that into the organization to do a private banking role, something that we never would have done previously. And then when that kind of skill set comes in, they actually challenge, right, people who have only grown up in the silo of private banking, right, and actually bring a whole new mode of thinking. I run the strategy organization in APAC. Not one of the team actually comes from a consulting background.
But has that changed in the last couple of years, or has that always been like
yes
Right.
So historically there was a mindset that you could only hire people from a consulting background, but once again with this whole DNI focus, and we switching the way we all think, slates included people that were previous investment bankers, people that were equity analysts, and so now what we have is a team which actually works very well together but brings very, very different perspectives.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Andrew, please.
I think two things from our business, which it's done, it's not new, but it's accelerated two underlying trends. And, the fact that we're now pretty much delivering most of our strategy work and most of our work, which, strategy work is probably only 30% of what we do, in a hybrid fashion. Two things that have happened in strategy consulting. The first one is non-traditional skills as part of the firm. So whether that is data and analytics, whether that is designers, whether that is technology architects, and those type of functions, those type of roles, which are essential for delivering digital transformation. And as we move more onto the climate transformation epoch over the next 5 to 7 years, specialists in that area, those people have been the hybrid way of working has accelerated our ability to bring on that talent and to integrate them into our teams. So, and wherever those people may be, they can now be contributors to our team. I think the second one is around partnerships. So, one of the things that we do is if we're doing, for example, a climate and sustainability transformation, we don't have all of the skills either at a client or within BCG. So you need to bring together a group of different providers with different skills to, build that either transformation program or, run that initiative. And that's just been accelerated by the fact that we're now able to operate in hybrid. So I think that that's probably something that's going to be applicable in other industries as well.
Okay. Now let's just, let me bring you back in then on the next question, because you've referenced hybrid there a few times. I mean, clearly hybrid working is obviously becoming the new norm, has become the new norm, flexible working, etc. But has it come at the detriment of culture and collaboration? How have employees overcome the tension between maintaining culture and employees' preferences around remote working? Andrew, what's your view on that?
Well, I think it's hit us worse than most because of the things that I spoke about in the first point, which is that our business is kind of dependent on training and teaming and being in the same room. And, we are fundamentally an apprenticeship business, right? We do that more than we do consulting almost. I think we've done, what are we practically doing? So the first thing is for all of our team members who are either in support functions or in our knowledge team, we've moved to 100-day flexible working, which means that you can select to work from home 100 days a year, which is basically 2.5 days per week. And then there's some things that you should be in the office for. So for example, you know, our affiliation weeks and our affiliation trips or things like that. But ultimately you have complete flexibility. And then on the consultant teaming, we have a standard, what I said earlier, which is the 1 week on at clients or 50% on at clients, and try and build that as standard. I think we've doubled down on virtual affiliation. And we've doubled down on, you know, the training and, you know, events around training and support to try and plug some of the gaps that we've had because people haven't been, as a matter of course, you know, sitting in the room until 11 o'clock at night with their boss. But yes, it definitely has. But there are things that you can do to maintain the value of hybrid, particularly around sustainability, you know, while covering those gaps, right? Or while finding alternatives.
Okay, thank you. Harpreet, has the culture been impacted by hybrid working at HSBC?
I mean, the culture is certainly evolving, right? Not just across HSBC, but most firms that you know I'm aware of, and you know the elements of evolution are very consistent, right? It's essentially around promoting flexibility, which we've all talked about. It's also making sure that no matter whether we meet in person or we're working virtually, you know, there's a spirit of collaboration, and then you know a greater emphasis on employee well-being, right? Both physical well-being as well as mental well-being. So I would say corporate cultures are evolving. Now, you know, what does hybrid work mean? I don't think there's a singular answer to that, because as Andrew was saying, it sort of kind of depends on the work each individual does, right? But in large organizations, we do need to establish some baseline principles. So the way we've sort of approached it is, you know, look at three kind of pillars, if you will. One is essentially customer focus, right? So make sure the way we work, the end of the day suits what the needs of our customers are, and it obviously allows us to deliver the best possible commercial outcomes for the businesses, right? Because otherwise we won't be successful. So that's kind of one principle, if you will. Second is you know, ensure that there is a healthy team dynamic, and you know, most things we can do virtually over Zoom calls. Yeah. But at certain times there is a need to sort of get together, you know, have a cup of coffee, you know, go out with your colleagues for a lunch. Yeah. And you cannot do that if you don't meet in person. So strike a healthy balance. And then lastly, it's about flexibility. You know, you certainly have to offer individual employees the choice in terms of how they work and when they work, but that has to be nuanced and adjusted sort of in relation to the roles we play, right? In a bank, obviously, you know, we do meet the needs of our customers who walk into our branches. So when it comes to our frontline staff, we cannot completely pivot to remote working, because we've got to be in the branches to serve our customers. Equally, people who are not into kind of client-facing roles, you know, can perhaps spend more time working remotely. So it's no one size fits all. I think it depends on an individual's circumstances, but there's certainly some guiding principles which we've sort of laid out, which allow people to kind of make their individual decisions and choices. Yeah, thank you. Harshika, do you think banks have a challenge regionally rather than just as a collective? So, you know, is the challenge you're facing with JP Morgan in Asia to maintain the culture different to JP Morgan in the States, or is it a universal challenge across the bank with regard to how finding this balance between hybrid working and maintaining the culture of the business?
So I think in answer to the question on has culture changed in the era of hybrid working, and for most of 2020 and part of 21, full remote working, I would say not. And the reason I say that is because the firm, as many other firms were able to do, was deploy technology very, very quickly, deploy methods of communicating like Zoom very quickly. Yeah. And it's amazing how managers and the firm more broadly put together employee engagement scheduled, which meant, right, that you had plenty of opportunities, whether it was your own team, whether your broader line of business, the country you're in, a BRG, a business resource group that you might be part of. You had plenty of opportunity to stay connected. Okay, yeah. So that's number one. Now, what does change though, when you have too much remote working and not enough in person, is I think Andrew's already touched upon new joiners, whether they're an analyst straight out of university or a new joiner to the firm, you know, not having enough time to meet your colleagues, spend time with your colleagues. Clearly, a culture of an organisation can't be imparted on someone that doesn't come into the office and has never spent any time, both socially, right, and in an ad hoc fashion, to build up any idea of what the culture should be. I think the other thing that struggles is clearly ideation. I think certainly, you know, I'm in a quarantine hotel for the last 6 days. Yeah. I'm probably much more transactional with my day, right, as opposed to ideating for the future. Yeah. And it is amazing how much ideation occurs just sitting next to someone, bumping into someone at the vending machine. Huge. Or having coffee, right? The final point that I'd like to make is a company culture is based on being open and transparent and being able to have difficult conversations. And if you don't have enough time with one another in the office or at lunch or for a drink after work or whatever, you know, or a squash game, yeah, having challenging conversations with people who are simply your Zoom colleagues is not going to be optimal. Yeah. Right. I think that ability to say, oh, Nick, you know, I disagreed with you on that point will come much better the more time I've actually spent with you, versus what Zoom can become, which is transactional. Yeah, and I say this in the context of people, like I say, who are perhaps new to an organization or younger and therefore need time to learn about the company.
It sounds like from your answer that the answer to my first question to you specifically around the differences in culture by region is that, and actually it's not about region, it's the same challenge wherever you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. I'm going to amalgamate the next two questions then, because I think they pretty much touch upon the same theme here, which is really looking about how employees can drive engagement and satisfaction whilst reducing attrition. But perhaps most importantly, I think one of the key things that we were seeing in the early stages of lockdown were employee burnout, that ability to separate work from home. You know, many people, I think Harshika said, living in sort of apartments, small apartments, you know, walking out of their bedroom where their desk was into the kitchen, that was their commute, right? And certainly I experienced that for quite a long time myself. What steps have been taken at your respective organizations to stem the tide of attrition, increase employee satisfaction, and avoid burnout with your teams and with the individuals within the organization? Andrew, should we start with you on that one? Because you mentioned the one specific initiative around sort of the 100 days, but any other initiatives that BCG have brought into play here?
Yeah, so again, this is a consulting example, but actually one of the things that we've done recently is rolled out this example to our operations and our knowledge teams. So, you know, maybe it can be applied in other organizations as well. So we've been running what we call it comes from predictable time off, but it stands for predictability, teaming, and open communication at BCG, our PTO process. And that's been relatively significantly revamped over the past 24 months. But basically what that is every team at BCG has a weekly survey, which has like 10 to 15 questions about, you know, how's your work-life balance? Are your managers creating safe spaces for you to, you know, voice your opinions? Do you feel listened to? And things of that nature. There's then a weekly meeting, which is professionally facilitated by, you know, an independent member of the new ways of working team, which brings together everybody in the team, including the partners, to discuss how we're working together. Then, you know, identifies issues that need to be addressed for collaboration, safe spacing, and you know, time off in hours, and then takes that forward. is kind of a survey which is published across the system so that everybody can see what cases are doing well across different dimensions and which are not. So we've been running that in a kind of an abbreviated form for years, but since the COVID pandemic, we've stepped up in terms of professional facilitation, in terms of the type of questions that we ask around, do you feel connection to your team, and the discussions that we have. We've rolled that out to, we have around 500 operations and KT staff in Southeast Asia, so that we can use those. And that's actually also working relatively well, because in a lot of these line roles, it's never discussed how we're working together as a team. It's always kind of left to fester or workplace conversations. Work conversations. So we started rolling that out, and it has had some success at, just making sure that people are discussing the way that they're working, and if there are issues that can be resolved, there's a forum for discussing that.
Okay, thank you. Harpreet, please.
Yeah, I think, look, just building on what Andrew said, right, a couple of themes. So one, I think stepping up well-being initiatives, right, and that can be multifaceted, and certainly within HSBC it is, right. So it's things around doing more on mental well-being, on kind of physical well-being, and to some extent even financial well-being. And there's a number of examples which we don't have the time to go into, but that's something the organization has really stepped up, and employees have embraced it. I think the second part is, pandemic or no pandemic, I think employee development needs to continue, right? That's an ongoing initiative. So we obviously, because of all the restrictions, conditions not permitting, we could not get large numbers of people in classroom settings, which then meant that we had to kind of try and create an in-person classroom environment virtually. So at HSBC, we've got something which is called the HSBC University, which is essentially a web portal. And we kind of delivered that web portal in an app format as well. And every employee of HSBC, no matter where you work, what you do, which part of the world you are, have access to this portal, and it's got over 20,000 different courses. Right. So I think that's one other area we've been focused on. And the other thing I'd say is just being more purposeful and sort of deliberate in providing people the opportunity for mentoring and coaching, right? So we've kind of created what is called coaching circles. These are informal circles, but you basically allow senior colleagues to take out time, and it's a commitment of time, and senior people within HSBC have made that commitment. And you provide coaching and mentorship to people who would value that, and I think a lot of people in sort of the junior mid-levels have really appreciated it.
Have you seen a reduction within HSBC or of that burnout situation over the last sort of 12 months? Because I know it's not just with HSBC. I think with most organizations it was very prevalent in the early days. Have you seen a reduction over the last 12 months that people have become more adjusted and more balanced with their working practices?
I think people have, and it's no longer about, by and large, it's no longer about, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. back-to-back Zoom calls. I think people have learned to kind of, balance work and life. It's not always easy, but I think with time, people have gotten used to it. I would also say that, the survey findings I was referencing earlier, people are telling us that they feel their work-life balance is in a much better place. Their mental well-being is in a much better place. And I think what we are also seeing is both managers as well as employees. And this is, I think, still a difficult subject people don't want to talk about when it comes to mental health. People are a lot more open and transparent. We've obviously also invested in upskilling our people managers to learn how to manage sort of potential mental well-being concerns in their teams, and then basically signpost people that need help. And for employees, education, make resources available, support systems, that indeed, if indeed you need help, you're able to speak up, and resources are available. So I think collectively, all these things have certainly made a meaningful difference.
Fantastic. Harshika, your thoughts on this, please?
Sure, so I'll try and not repeat what Andrew and Harpreet said, because many of the things they touched on, we as an organisation are also doing. But just referencing, for example, Harpreet talked about the future of the office in one of the earlier questions. And so in answer to your question on burnout, if you come to any of our JP Morgan offices now, where they've been newly developed, you have a gym in there, you have a fitness room in there, you have a doctor's surgery in there, you have pool tables in there, a far cry from what they looked like even 3 or 4 years ago. And what that has done, and anytime you could go in any time of the day, right, you've always got people there, right? So you're just creating a space which is not a desk and a screen for people to go and relax. I think that's one thing I think that's really worked. And as we rethink what our offices look like, these collaboration spaces are key. The second thing which has gone down very well is having an employee assistance program. So it's an independent, the last couple of years obviously exacerbated everyone's personal challenges, and therefore having, a 24/7 Monday to Sunday hotline that you can call and speak to a psychologist about whatever your problem was. Start with a counsellor and then, be referred, all paid for by the firm. But once again, people have used that for topics that, frankly, they don't feel comfortable talking to a family member about, or someone in the office about. So I think the amount of spend that we're now doing as an organisation on that, I think I talked about in the first question, the whole person has gone up tremendously. The other thing that we do as an organisation, which also works very well, is this concept of skip levels. It's part of the JP Morgan DNA now, which is senior people from the organisation sit down with people who are not necessarily in their line. It's definitely not a direct report, right, for a 1 hour session just to chat about what's on people's mind.
Right.
Daniel Pinto himself did it, for example, when the whole Black Lives Matter issue emerged in the US, right, and sat together, probably did 50 sessions like that across the organisation, right? And like I said, and those are forums where there's no agenda, there's no right or wrong answer. But once again, it's become so institutionalized now that people come to these sessions as an opportunity to raise what can be done better. So lots of things going on, I think. I think the final point on burnout, by the way, you've got to lead by example as a manager. Right. So if you say pens down Friday, or if you say don't email at the weekend, right, as a manager,
then you can't email.
Right, yeah. Precise. Right, because certainly in Asia, we are in an environment where people will look up to their manager, right, and certainly feel bad about not being in the office or not replying back to that email at 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning.
Yeah. Let me come back to you on another point. All of you have raised this actually, but it's interesting, I guess, from my perspective as obviously as an individual that runs a headhunting business serving organizations. You've all referenced pretty much the same thing, that despite the COVID situation, work got done and to the same standard that it was getting done pre-COVID. But one could argue that that was done by people that had been brought up in a normal world working in an office environment. We're now dealing with a new crop of individuals coming out of university, coming into a new environment that is a mix between office and hybrid, where the classically trained approach is very different. I mean, as Andrew said, BCG is an apprentice organization. Harpreet has just touched upon the fact that HSBC has a university. Is there a concern that if you roll the tape forward 5-10 years, the capability and skill set of individuals is perhaps going to be less than it is now because they're not having the same on-desk with person experience? Or is there a confidence that virtual training and education is going to be just as good as traditional training at desk as it used to be pre-COVID. Harshika, I'll start with you on that one, if that's okay. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So listen, I have two stepdaughters who have just left university and started the world of work in the UK. They're a good bellwether of how they get trained. They both have flexible working, which means to their delight, Monday and Friday are at home, but actually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're in the office. They call that hybrid, they call that flexible working. But for them, you tick both boxes, which is you give the millennial what they want around flexibility, but equally they're getting that happy balance of being with their colleagues Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to be trained. So I don't think any organisation is saying all or nothing. I think even for these these university graduates coming into our organisation, there will be in-person training. There will be drinks and dinner after the in-person training. They want all of that. Right. So I don't see that. All I'm saying now is what we've managed to do as an organisation is build up an amazing virtual toolkit as well
to supplement,
to complement. So I think what would have been subpar offerings 2.5 years ago, because we never had to build them, right, are now very, very good, which means that people can actually be trained more, but using both mediums. I think what people are fatigued with is doing their trainings online like this, right? They would like to be around a table, have breakfast together, lunch together, and learn that one.
As you said, that ideology side. Andrew, do you agree with that? I mean, in BCG with the apprentice model, do you see now that, do you feel the capability will be just as good in 5 years' time as it was pre-COVID?
I mean, I think the jury's still out on whether, we are able to deliver the same level of training and the same level of apprenticeship. But, I think people are pretty adaptive, right? I mean, if you look at what happened over the course of the COVID pandemic, as we say, the world continued to kind of move on and people adapted relatively quickly. I think, the two things that I would say if you're a non-consulting firm in terms of learning from consulting is, we have a 2-year rotation program in each level, right? So you're a consultant for 2 years, a manager for 2 years, and a principal for 2 years. And the idea behind that is that you are using your skills, and so you feel as though you're in the right role. But then secondly, that there's clear progression for you in terms of where you go to next and when you will get there. So if you're a bank or another financial institution, how are you actively thinking about making sure that there's both people feel as though they're being fulfilled and are in the right role for their skills? They feel as though they're doing the right job. And then secondly, is there a clear pathway in terms of where they go from there? What's the next level? What do they need to do in order to advance to get there? And if you can articulate that, then the training and the growth and the retention flows from that. I think so. You need to be very specific about that. It's very easy for people to get, say, stuck in a role and there's nowhere to go from there, and they don't feel as though they're being fulfilled and they don't feel as though their skills are being used, and that's when people both either leave the institution or they don't develop.
Thank you. Harpreet, any final thoughts on that before we move on to the next question? I know you touched upon it with what HSBC have done, but anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just building on what Andrew and Harshika said, right? I don't think 5 years out, if we continue down this path, that outcomes will be inferior or productivity levels would go down.
Right, great.
And that's why we call it hybrid. It's not either or. It's a bit of both, and hopefully the best of both. And I take cue from my two boys, right, 10 and 5-year-old. I mean, the last 2.5, 3 years, if you look at their schools, it's a bit of both. And it's different when they are at home. I'm sure my wife has different perspectives, but when they're at home, it's different. But when they go back to school with their friends, it's different. So are they missing out on social interactions and the EQ? I don't think so. Are they adapting to kind of new ways of learning through digital means? Absolutely, yes. Does that make them more resilient? I think the answer is yes, right? And end of the day, we are very adaptable. We are very resilient. So I don't think it would be a net negative, if not a net positive.
Okay, thank you. Couple of questions then we've had from attendees. Just coming to one. So, stemming from Harshika's point around looking at diverse skill sets and backgrounds, what is the right way for people trying to get into strategy roles? Any tips on that, Harshika?
So normally in strategy roles, you get potential candidates to do case studies, right? And that levels the playing field intensely, because we don't choose case studies which require any form of technical pre-knowledge, right? We deliberately choose subjects which, frankly, anyone having worked, frankly, in any industry can answer. So, and through that case study, that's how you learn. Can the person take a problem and come up thoughtfully with a solution, i.e. the analytical skills? Can they then translate that and use the right data to put it down on paper? Then when they actually present the paper, can they present it well and create buy-in? And then when questions are asked, how do they tackle questions which they know the answers to versus questions which they don't know the answer to? So having acknowledged that I needed to have a much more diverse slate to find candidates and get the best candidates in, we really repivoted the questions from tell me about a project that you've done when you were at McKinsey or BCG. Yeah. But taking other examples that they might have in their life, which then demonstrate how did they get a difficult stakeholder on side. Right. You know, examples of how they might manage a team, and then through the case studies, how they actually approach a problem. Yeah, no, interesting. Okay, thank you. No, I think it was a great answer. Okay, final question, and really hopefully just a very quick one as well. Your top tip when thinking about immediate actions employers can implement to drive greater retention within their business in this new world. Harpreet, we'll start with you on that one. So what's your top tip of everything that you've seen and heard and done within HSBC and across the wider community? What's your number one top tip that you think resonates most?
Well, I'd say, look, people stick with organizations because they love the team environment, they love their work, and they have a sense of purpose. So I think creating that environment, intellectually stimulating people through purposeful work, being flexible in your approach towards how and where we work, and then investing in talent and career development. I think they all make a good recipe for talent retention. Perfect. Thank you. Harshika?
Harpreet stole everything I was going to say. I don't know what else I'm going to say.
Well, then that's it. That's good.
Pay everyone lots of money. How about that?
I hope the CEOs are all listening as well. And Andrew, last but not least.
No.
Okay, three things. One is don't. Money does matter, and we can't say it doesn't. But you can structure the way that you reward people to, incentivize loyalty. So you be clever about that and don't neglect it. I think purpose is incredibly important, and you need to be able, as an organization, to articulate the purpose of the roles that people are working towards. Because if you can't articulate it, they can't articulate it. And then the other one is, which we didn't really talk about, is kind of proving you're there at moments of truth. And I think if you look at when the COVID hit, were you there for your employees when, hey, my parents are sick? Hey, I don't have access to medical facilities. Hey, this is actually the time that it really, really matters. Is my employee there for me or not? And so you can, talk in forums all you like, but are you there when it matters? And how do you, as a large institution, systematically set it up so that you are? I think that's the third thing to think about.
Fantastic.
I think, Nick, one thing to add,
Please.
We've all heard the old adage that people leave managers, not organizations. And I think if there's one learning for me as a manager in the last couple of years, is that we all have to grow as managers with the time as well, so that we can implement all the good stuff that Andrew and Harpreet just talked about. So when you're managing virtually, you have to manage very differently to when you're managing people in person. When you've got some people, they're sitting next to you versus a couple of them being at home, once again, as a manager, you need to make sure that you're giving both sets an even platform. So it's not simply about teaching people that are working for us, but we've also got to upskill with the journey as well.
And what a fantastic way to end. Well, look, thank you to all three of you. We've run out of time. We've literally got to the hour. That's amazing. So Harshika, thank you. Harpreet, Andrew, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to those that have attended. There will be a recording of this discussion that will be shared. And thank you for those that have attended today as well. And it's good to see you all today. Have a good day. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.